Hi, everybody, and welcome to 5 and 15, a webinar series from CO where we promise to give you 5 useful, helpful, we hope insightful tips that you can use in brand building and protecting your brands, developing them, all within the constraints of a 15-minute webinar because we know you are busy. I'm Mark Gale, CEO at CO. We're a strategic marketing and communications firm, so end of commercial, because we have some really great stuff to get to today. And our guest today is Maeve Webster of Menu Matters. Maeve, one of my favorite people in the industry, because
Thank you.
well, it's true. You're fun, you're interesting, and I always feel a little bit smarter after I talk to you. So I'm like, yeah, okay, what's that like? So
Nice.
Maeve has been collaborating with us for more than a decade on research about agriculture, food system, labels, all kinds of great topics. She is an independent researcher, really important. So we know that our research is valid. So Maeve, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, and what we're gonna do, because there's so much good stuff to talk about here, we're gonna jump right into it. We surveyed about 1,150 American consumers, well dispersed across the country, well dispersed across age groups. So this is statistically projectable research. And then for those of you listening today, we're going to send you more information. We're just going to get to like 5 key points today, but we're going to send you information and you will be able to download the research, be able to talk to Maeve, talk to me if you want. You can send me a note, mark.g@charlestonnorwig.com, mark.g. Don't worry, we're not going to bug you, but we will send and share the information. So Maeve, let's jump right into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Our first point, consumers are concerned about the food supply chain. Consumers are a little worried, and a good percentage of them, half, are pretty concerned. So what do you make of that? What are they concerned about? And, bring us along a little bit there.
Well, I think it's 2 things. I think, first of all, it's the power of the media finally shining a spotlight on a food system that typically don't get a lot of press, right? Processing, houses, manufacturing. So I think that's certainly one, but I think more importantly, most consumers have found that their retailers, whether it's grocery stores, supercenters, whatever it is, have had shortages very consistently, actually, across the board and since March. And it's one thing to be in the middle of the height of the pandemic in March and April and have shortages, but the fact that they're still occurring even now into August, which is part of what we found in that research, speaks to the fact that it's really laid bare for consumers to see that there are real issues in the food chain from start to finish. And so I think consumers have a heightened sense of concern or certainly awareness.
And I know they're not exactly loving prices creeping up either.
Right, and which is of course part and parcel of both supply and demand and then the supply problems, right? In some cases, the supply issues that were created by the restaurant closures have helped consumers. We've seen some prices go down, like specialty proteins and some other prices for items that are sold into restaurants. Now they've got excess stock, but in other cases, all these shortages have certainly pushed prices up, and that's just, I think, augmenting the concern that's already there.
Now, I know when I go by restaurants here in our town, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, where the 5 O's, where I happen to live outside of Milwaukee, I see people at restaurants and everything, but truth of it is still, most of us are getting most of our food at grocery retail, some form of that, which is, why we focus a little on that. Concerning topic here is point number 2, 75% of consumers, do I have that right, are concerned about coronavirus when shopping or when accessing retail food like that.
Yeah, and so grocery shopping has really, and still is, considered one of the safer activities, even in areas where they're having spikes, largely because retailers and consumers have made efforts to socially distance, wear masks, you've got the new traffic patterns and a whole host of other issues. I don't know that in reality it's a lot safer than necessarily being at a restaurant, whether you're inside or outside, but the perception is certainly there that it is safer. But I think the more consumers are out and about, the more they're around people, the more the coronavirus spikes in certain areas, any activity is going to be concerning. So it might be seen as a little safer, but the concern is still there. So I don't think anybody can let down their guard when it comes to sanitation efforts that they're making to increase confidence and comfort levels. Everybody needs to be very diligent, I think, for the foreseeable future, regardless of what the pandemic is actually doing.
Yeah, and I know in these things, there are always winners and losers.
Mm-hmm.
Right now. Food service people really hit hard, but some of those supplying restaurants are having. I mean, I'm talking to some people; they're having record years.
Yeah.
So that's always happening. But so maybe that safety concern of consumers, that's what's driving. Like we do pickup or delivery. That's the choice that we've chosen in my family here. And what is it? Something like 50% of people are doing that at least sometime.
Yeah, which is, I was very surprised that it was that high at this point. And that's across all consumers, not just in metro areas. Now, of course, metro areas, urban areas have much higher than rural areas like where I am. It's really not even an option for us. Pickup delivery is not. But the fact that 50% of consumers across the country, across all different types of metro areas are using these services really speaks to the fact that they are looking for alternatives to some degree or another because of that concern. Some people are using it more than others, but the fact that it's creeping into even to a small degree into regular behavior, I think speaks to the fact that people's habits are absolutely changing.
Yeah, it's great for DoorDash, I guess. Who's the neighbor kid is doing DoorDash when he was home in the summer is like, really busy. So who's choosing to have that delivery or pickup versus in store? Are there differences between age, area of the country, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, for both pickup and for delivery, as you might imagine, it's more tech forward consumers. So it's millennials for sure, Gen Z, but Gen Z, there's a very small share of Gen Z that's actually out on their own at this point, but they're certainly adopting it because they're very tech savvy, tech natives. We are seeing boomers begin to participate in it at a larger share, but they're still not nearly as fast at adopting it, which is not entirely surprising, just because of their lack of tech knowledge versus the other cohorts.
Watch it. So.
No, yeah, my mom is actually pretty good at it, to be honest with you. So, but I think aside from that, but I think the other thing to dig myself out of this hole. I think the other thing though is that boomers are more engaged in buying fresh items as well. And they're used to going to the store and touching it and feeling it and looking, and that's very much part of their habits. Where younger consumers, I think, feel more comfortable just trusting that.
Yeah.
Fresh items will get there and that they'll be good quality. They don't have to worry about the pickers. I think older consumers like being part of that decision.
Yeah, there's a definite, depending upon which outlet you choose, the quality of what you get varies.
Of course. And so in that, we'll begin to see the fallout as well. There will be winners and losers in the tech, because if they're not training their staff to pick produce in the right way, to be careful in that. If it's just throwing stuff into a basket, we'll see the same kind of fallout that we're beginning to see now with all other industries.
Yeah, very good segue into our third point here. Grocery shopping is frustrating no matter how you do it during coronavirus. And, I've got a gallon substitution of mayonnaise and a 3-year supply of olives as testament to that. But yeah, what about that frustration? Is that breaking down by age, or is that just universal? This is kind of a pain.
It's pretty universal. And I think because retailers have had to take, as with so many other groups, have had to take so many steps to ensure social distancing. It is a real change versus the way we all used to go to the grocery store. And quite frankly, which was a very, I'm going to say, thoughtless, and not in a bad way, but you just went, you didn't think about it. You got what you needed and you got out. And that's really not what it is anymore. There are lines, there are systems, there are traffic patterns. And that's all very new. I think one challenge, and this is true for both restaurants and retailers, is there's been a lot of talk of the fact that consumers are willing to put up with the frustration. And I would say be careful with that ideology. They will only put up with it for so long. And I think that people's patience with that frustration is certainly nearing its end, if not at its end in many cases. And that's not to say get rid of the social distancing. I mean, you have to have those processes in place, but everyone needs to be focused on how to mitigate the frustration as much as possible and not just assume people will put up with it indefinitely.
Any quick tip on what you would do if you were, what should a retailer do about that?
Certainly, I think there needs to be a consistency in enforcement. The minute you don't have consistent enforcement, that certainly elevates frustration among those who are and are not following it. I think communication needs to be a huge part of it. And that was something we found. It was that retailers and restaurants need to be very clear in communication, clearly communicate what's happening, what's expected, what's out, when will it be back, and start identifying, particularly for the specific retailers and their customers, what are the key pain points? It's going to differ nationwide, but identify those key pain points and start addressing them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, Tim Metcalf was one of our guests a few weeks back, and regional, really well thought of grocer. And, I think sometimes the smaller have an advantage. They have a really active Facebook presence. So they're communicating directly with their consumers that way, which, larger retailer probably harder to do that. So point number 4, shortages. Yeah, it's not so much about shortages, but it's what consumers are doing. They're finding substitutes. And they're saying, I think the research says they're saying that they might stick with those substitutes, which is kind of scary if you're a certain kind of brand. And, I switch and then I go, oh, actually, I like this other better.
I think, and actually I've been doing research in a number of different areas in the food industry, and our findings support findings that I've seen from a number of other sources, that brand loyalty, one of the key takeaways from the pandemic, or one of the key outcomes with regard to consumer behavior across the board, is that brand loyalty has been eroded, that consumers now either have been forced to find new alternatives or are simply more open to it based on convenience, based on confidence, any number of elements. And every manufacturer, retailer, restaurant, hotel, whatever it ends up being, has to assume that if their patrons have found substitutes, there's a good shot that they'll stick with them to some degree or another. And so this is going to really shake up a lot of different categories, different parts of the food industry, as brands come out of either their own shortages or come out of the pandemic and find maybe their market share deteriorated because people have, and they're going to have to rethink what their competitive set is, rethink how they're going to communicate, rethink innovation, what that might mean based on these new products that consumers have found.
Right. And we're going to get to, just so everybody knows, we're going to get to our 5th point right now within the constraints of the 15 minutes. And we're going to come back to that point. Maeve is just making for a couple of bonus minutes. So point number 5, and in this divisive time, honestly, I don't care what party affiliation you have, you turn on the new, it's just global pandemic, political fighting, all this jazz. This next point was really personally encouraging to me, that consumers are saying that they have empathy and some concern for all the workers within the food system. Can you talk about that a little bit? And I just found it like a little bit of faith in humanity there. So talk a little bit about this concern consumers have for, not that we can necessarily do anything about it, but it's nice to hear that people give a darn.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Those numbers were huge, the share of consumers that are concerned. And the way we asked that question was concerned about any worker in the food industry, whether it was pickers at the farm level, food processing plant employees, restaurant employees, grocery store employees. And there was a real concern across the board. And I think, like you said, if there's any silver lining to the pandemic, one of those silver linings will be that I think there is a greater sense of empathy for others, even the divisiveness and the partisanship that we're seeing. right now that people are worried about others, are worried about, and I think mask wearing is part of that, right? And again, not to get political, but the reason people wear masks is for others, not themselves. And to see the large share of people who have adopted that behavior, I think speaks to the fact that there's a greater concern for everyone else and how everyone else is doing, not just me and my immediate circle. And so I
Yeah,
think that'll change the way people think about where they go, what they do, and how they spend their money.
Yeah, it's great. And for everybody listening, we're going to send you so you're going to be able to look at this and dissect it a little yourself. And we can put you in contact with Maeve if you want to get in deeper, or send me a note. But so that's pretty much close. That's wrapping our 15 minutes. But we're going to go for just a couple, because there are 2 more points we want to get to. So we'll go a couple more minutes. And Maeve, when you were talking about this substitution, this interesting statistic, perhaps you can tell us what to make out of it. It's only about 40%, but it's real. People going direct to the manufacturer. And, I wonder how far that goes and I was thinking about this before we got together. We're, my personal, family here, we're doing everything from, I thought, well, the smallest thing, we're communicating directly with a local farmer, chickens and beef, Lucknow Farms. And our communication is probably best with her, because it's back and forth on Facebook all the way out to the biggest retailers. But you're saying, or what this research is saying, some people are interested maybe in going direct to manufacturers. What does that mean? How would that work? Would I just all of a sudden have to start going to 20 different sources for products, or what does that mean?
It's very possible, but the way you say that, 20 different sources, seems like a hassle, but when you're doing it online, you can hit 20 different sources probably in a 10-minute period when it comes to shopping online, particularly if you've been there before. So in the past, going to 20 different sources might mean a day and a half worth of chores. Now it's a lot easier. And we've already seen, I think it was Pepsi, already set up their own direct-to-consumer storefront. And I think that type of direct B2C activity is going to increase, partially because of the frustration that people have with grocery shopping now. We've already seen it hit clothing, tech, and all other categories outside of food, that there's really no reason why many of these manufacturers can't or shouldn't be thinking about doing the same thing. And I would even argue that that is not just for business to consumers, but a lot of manufacturers should start thinking about it with regard to business to restaurants as well. I mean, I think there are great opportunities, and I apologize to the distributors out there, because obviously this will hit them pretty hard. But that being said, there are great opportunities to simplify the supply chain, to start communicating directly, be more in control of the data you need to assess your consumers' needs or your customers' needs if they're operators. There's a lot of benefits. And now with all of the different services available for shipping and whatnot, it should be a lot easier for manufacturers to off.
Yeah, probably it'll be, who knows where it'll exactly shake out. It'll probably be one of those permanent changes that come out of this pandemic. And I know folks, we're going a few minutes long, but we got to get in this one last point, because I think it's a really good one. And come on, let's finish with kind of a warm and fuzzy. And that warm and fuzzy is that people still love farmers.
Yeah.
So 1,150 Americans across age, income, all that, they still love, what percentage of us still love farmers, Maeve?
I actually, I think you've got the data in front of you.
I do.
Exactly how much. It's very high.
If I go from trust completely, trust a great deal, trust somewhat, it's into the mid 80s.
Right.
It's into the it's like 85% of people. And frankly, if you don't trust farmers, the other 15% get out of here. But
we didn't ask why, but that would have been an interesting question.
Yeah. Right, so exactly. 85% of the people still trust farmers. So, that's great.
It is great.
Despite all the problems, because as we know, working in agriculture, there are a lot of people, and really, whether it's processing, retailing, whatever, you and I are both talking with a lot of those people all the time. They are diligently working hard to bring us our food, and we're fortunate, believe it or not. to live in a country where there is such plenty, despite our challenges, and to have so much safe, affordable food, even at the increase in price, it's still affordable and great. So,
Yeah,
any final thoughts, Maeve?
yeah, along those lines, I think we were talking about the concern with the supply chain. I don't think that the concern is a lack of trust. And I think that
Oh,
comes back to their trust in the farmers. And I think that's important. There's a difference between be concerned whether or not they'll have food available for them versus
the
trusting that the food
disruption.
is
So
safe
people
and
are worried about the
exactly
disruption and
right,
distribution and that
right.
sort of thing. Yeah.
So I think it is good that we have not eroded the trust of consumers. So I think it's more just getting everything back into a groove so that consumers
Yeah.
stop worrying about it and start worrying about other things, I
Oh,
suppose.
yeah. No, that's a really good capper insight. So thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, we got to go. We got to let you go. Thanks for hanging with us this long. Our guest today, Maeve Webster of Menu Matters, brilliant researcher, always insightful. It's no wonder she's such a sought after speaker and researcher in the space. I'm Mark Gale, CEO at CO. Thank you for joining us today, 5 and 15. If you have a question, you can respond to the information we're going to send you. We're sharing this with you, or email me, mark.g@charlestonnorway.com. Thank you so much for joining us today for 5 and 15. Our mantra, be useful. I hope we were useful to you today in terms of running your operation, protecting, nurturing your brands. Thanks, and that's it for today. Bye now.